Rahayu Mahzam.
Mr. Chairman, my son has Down syndrome and has been diagnosed to be on the autism spectrum. He will turn 6 this year. I have a lot to thank my son for teaching me patience and resilience, for making me the person I am. He has also opened my eyes to a whole community of people with different abilities and families who support them. The more I learn about the diverse range of disabilities, the more I realize that there is a lot I do not know. One of the many things I'm still learning is the appropriate terminology to use at times, and I beg for indulgence. There are some specific needs within each disability group. There's a different range of abilities and therefore a differing potential amongst the PWDs. There are also different dynamics among the advocates and activists, which may lead to uneven awareness and support structures for different disability groups. I'm therefore grateful that the government has taken a massive effort to put together different pieces and come up with the concept of the Enabling Master Plan. I'm heartened with the existing programs in place to address the various needs of PWDs and their families. It is encouraging to see the developments of the Enabling Master Plan over the years. There are, however, some areas which I would like to find out more about and have some views on. Firstly, in light of the spectrum of disabilities mentioned above, I would like to find out how we could ensure that the needs of various groups are meaningfully addressed. How are the efforts in addressing needs categorized and organized, and is there some sort of framework to assess if we're adequately filling the gaps? My concern is, while the broad efforts go some way to advance the interests of the PWDs as a community, we may miss out specific issues that may only affect a particular group. For example, even within the PWIDs, there are different levels of abilities. So when we talk about lifelong learning and preparing them to live independently, could there be a final resolution that could maximize the potential of each group? I'm not expecting the government to do everything or for things to be done immediately. There needs to be a whole of society effort and involvement, a point which I will touch on later, but I believe it would be meaningful for a framework that dives into specifics for different groups, assessing how successful some measures are, addressing what the challenges are, and continually developing the infrastructure of support for the PWDs and their families. Secondly, I would like to know if there could be more streamlining of some services and support for both the PWDs and their family members. Akin to the approach in our child and maternal health and well-being efforts, could we also look at streamlining some services that could make it easier for families to manage the care of the PWDs? I'd spoken about Dr. Chen Shiling in my previous speeches. Dr. Chen had developed a holistic healthcare approach for aging caregivers and their adult children with ID, addressing also social issues and bringing together multidisciplinary stakeholders on the same platform. She has now set up a clinic, ID Health, that focuses on medical care of not just the PWIDs, but also their caregivers. Could we take a leaf from this approach and apply it to various other services? I note that SG Enable has also already been playing a role in being the one-stop spot for PWDs and their families. How has this experience been, and are there enhancements we can expect? Lastly, I feel it is imperative to harness the resources and support from the community. I believe the government can play a role to create the platform or structures to encourage ground-up effort. The formation of the AFA for caregivers of persons with disabilities, for example, is encouraging. How do we sustain this and provide the necessary platforms for more people to come together? I do hope to see more in our community step up to offer time or resources so that together we can help to enhance support for PWDs and their families. Next cut. It is not uncommon for us as MPs to come across residents seeking assistance on caregiving issues. Just in the recent weeks, I met several residents from Bukit Batok East who had some challenges with caregiving. In one case, a woman brought her sister who has intellectual disability. The woman was crying. Both her elderly parents had passed away, one after the other, and rather unexpectedly. The late mother was the main caregiver of the sister, and my resident was at a loss as to how to now care for her sister. In another case, a gentleman reached out to me for help after his elderly mother, who had been the primary caregiver of his brother with special needs, had to undergo heart surgery. He was a sole breadwinner and had to take time off work to care for his family members. It was not a sustainable solution. During my house visits, I also meet many aunties who are caring for their elderly husbands. They do not have helpers and they lament about the challenges as they are not as strong as before. Those who have children do not want to burden their children. These are scenarios which are all too familiar to us. Much has been said about the challenges of caregiving, especially when it relates to a long-term arrangement, when the caregiver is the sole or primary caregiver, or where the person being cared for has some disabilities. There are indeed many dimensions of the challenges, including physical health and well-being of the caregiver and financial issues. These challenges are compounded further as the caregiver ages. I am grateful for the various existing support that are in place. SG Enable and AIC have been very helpful in assisting with various issues that arise. In the first two cases I mentioned above, I reached out to SG Enable and AIC, and my residents are in the process of getting the assistance they need. But not all matters can be resolved simply, and issues may not always be so straightforward. Some arrangements proposed may not fully suit the preferences of the family. I appreciate that there are limitations, and it would not be reasonable or sustainable to expect agencies to provide the panacea to all problems. Yet the issues remain. Caregivers still need the support. They need the respite so that they can continue with their task, and they need some assurance that they're not trapped in the circumstances alone, having to sacrifice their aspirations or well-being. I believe we need a whole-of-society approach. In 2019, PAP.SG, then under the leadership of you, Chairman, put up a submission to the government with proposals on various aspects of ageing. In one segment of the paper, it was noted that society should provide better support to caregivers, including those from the extended family members. I quote, "We recognize that the burden on them is heavy. Having proper caregiver support within the family can be instrumental for the well-being of our frail seniors. We believe that our society have an obligation to do more for the caregivers." Amongst other things, the paper called for a review of policies to strengthen the role that the extended family can play in supporting seniors. I believe, and this can include caregiver leave and flexible work arrangements. I believe these are already being looked at. While the government has a role in putting in place policies and support structures, I do hope to see families, extended families, stepping up to share the load for caring for their loved ones. We also need support from other people in the community. It is therefore heartening to note that there have been efforts like the projects carried out by the AFA for caregivers of persons with disabilities to support caregivers. I understand that there is a partnership with Caring SG to work on Project 3I. I would like to declare that I am an advisor of Caring SG, and I've been impressed by the efforts of Dr. Lim Hong Hui and her board members. I believe ground-up efforts like this should be encouraged. I'm therefore interested to hear about the update on the projects of the AFA and would like to know if the efforts can be scaled up to benefit more in the community. I hope this platform is a genesis to the creation of more support options for caregivers so that they can get the help, the respite, and the assurance they need to continue caring for their loved ones.